Okay, so let's get everything validated. WTF forms, it's kind of cool as it allows you to check to see if they're empty, and that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so we're going to go back to forms, okay, and we're going to add the following to it. We have to import the validators. So we're going to say from WT forms, remember that S, right? Dot validators, import data required. So from the validators of WT forms or W2F forms, whatever, we're going to import data required, which is the command that's going to say, hey, this is required. All right. Okay, so then all we got to do down here is we had a little comment and we say validators is going to be equal to data required, parentheses. So this is just saying that, hey, the first name, if the first name filled, this string filled is empty, it's going to throw off an error. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this and put it on all of them. Be careful with the copying and pasting. Okay, now submit button, that's not going to have any data in it, so you don't have to put it on that one, obviously. Okay, so now it's using data required. In other words, if it's blank, it's going to throw an error, but we need to actually do something with that. Okay, so the error will be thrown, but if we don't actually put the error on the page, then it's not going to do much. So we got to hop over to routes. Okay, and we have the sign up. Okay, and we're going to inside of the post method, we're going to set up an if statement. So if request.method, oh, wait, nope, sorry. That's the line above, obviously. If form.validate is equal to false, in other words, if something was put in there and something was empty, we're going to return render template signup.html and pass in the form variable. Else, return it worked. Okay. Oh, and I might have said something wrong in the last video. If request method equals post, that means if you hit the submit button, then do all this. If the request method is get, that just means it's trying to load the page. So it's just going to return the page. I may have said something like, if it didn't go through correctly or something, but that was wrong. So if request method is post, in other words, it's trying to submit the form, do all this. If the request method is get, that just means it's trying to load the page. So it'll return the template. It'll render the template. Okay. Anyway, so if request method is post, that means it's trying to submit the form. So if the form validate is false, in other words, if one of those was empty, it's just going to reload the page. Okay, but if the form validated and everything's good to go, then it will go to that it worked page. Okay, now we need to edit the sign up page to show those errors. Okay, so we're going to come back over here, make this a little bigger. All right, so what we're going to do is we have our hidden tag. Okay, we have our label. Now I'm going to do this in between the label. For each one of these, I'm going to do it in between the label and the actual text box. Okay. So I'm going to set up some Python tags. Okay, and it's going to say if form dot first name dot errors. In other words, if there's errors inside of the first name, in other words, if the data required is thrown off an error, then we got to do something. And we're going to do a loop. We're going to loop through all the errors and display them on the page. So for error in form, underscore name dot errors. Okay, and then we're going to print them out to the page. I'm going to give this a class of error. And if you go into the main.css, error, I made it red. That's all I did there. Okay. What we're going to print out is whatever is stored inside of error. Oops. Okay. And then we are going to type that out correctly one of these days. There we go. We're going to end the for loop. Okay, and then we're going to end the if statement. All right, so all this is doing, okay, in between the label and the text box. So if we come over here, oh, it's gonna freak out right now. Well, we can't. So you know how that it showed the, it had the label, and then right underneath it had the text box. Well, in between the label and the text box, an error will show up. So if there's errors, if this returns true, we're going to loop through, we're going to create a temporary variable called error, and we're going to store inside of that all of the errors. So it'll loop through, and if it sees an error, it'll store it inside of error. If there's another error, it'll store the second one inside of error, and so forth. So it loops through all the errors. Oh, did I have form name? Yeah, that's what it was freaking out about. It's going to be form.errors, right? Okay, hold on here. There we go. That's what it was freaking out, is I had form.name or something, and it didn't like that. So anyways, let's make sure I have that right. Okay, so anyways, it'll loop through form.firstName errors. So any errors that are in that first name text box, it'll loop through, and each error that it finds, it'll store inside of error. And then it'll print it out right here inside of this p tag, and then that ends the for loop, and that ends the if statement. Let's save that. We should be okay now because I'm actually going to be copying and pasting this, so I want to make sure it works. All right, there we go. So it's empty, and it's trying to submit, so it's saying, hey, this field is required. So I know it's working. So I'm going to take this, and just be really careful here, and I'm going to put it in between each one of these. So email and password. And of course, I need to change these up. So let's see, if form.lastName has any errors, go through all of the errors inside of lastName and print them out to the page. Now these are temporary variables that only exist in these for loops, so I can use the same variable in here. That's not a big deal. Okay, so now we got email, okay, and then password, that should be good, hopefully, right? Now we can check, come over here, and we can reload. Okay, and it's freaking out at me. So if I try to submit, it reloads the page, and then because remember over here on our routes, if it's false, in other words, it didn't validate, it's going to return or just basically reload the page. Once it reloads the page, then it goes through and it finds all these errors and then it displays it on the page. So this field is required, this field is required, and so forth. So we know it's working. Okay, good. Now, maybe we don't really like these generic errors. Maybe we want them to say something different. So that's actually really easy to change, which is cool. We just come over here and where it says data required, we're going to throw in what it should say. So here I could say enter first name. So you just put this in the parentheses. Enter last name. Enter email. And then enter password. All right, so now we can come back, refresh here. All right, so enter first name, enter last name, and now it's given us these more customized error messages instead of just fill out the field, right? Okay, so that's just to check to see if something's been filled in or not. So that's actually pretty easy, just using that data required, right? So we're going to throw in another one. We're going to check to make sure it's a valid email. All right, so we're going to import data required, and we're going to import the email validator as well. Okay, then we come down here to the email field, and we have the enter email, and right after that, we're going to add the new validator here. So we have the data required validator, and we're also going to use the email validator. And the way this works is we're just going to say, hey, enter valid email. So all these different validators that you import, you can just throw them in here and you just separate them by commas. So for the email string field, I'm going to have a data required to see if it's empty. I'm also going to validate the email if it's in the correct format with the @ symbol and the period and all that kind of stuff. And if it's not, I will say enter valid email. Okay. So we can check that. So I can put stuff in here. I'll put in this is not a valid email, right? And then I put in some sort of password. I hit sign up. Okay, all those errors go away except for right here. It'll say enter valid email because it's not a valid email. So I really like this. I think it's kind of cool how easy it is to put in these different validators. It's pretty slick. Okay, another one we can use is length. And I'm sure if you go to the the W2F forms documentation, you'll see all the different type of validators that exist. But we'll do the length one because maybe we want the password to be a certain length, right? So it's really similar. So I import the length validator. And then I come down to the password and do kind of the same thing. So right after that, I hit a little comma. We're going to use the length validator. And the way this works, it wants to know what the minimum amount is. So I'll say 5 characters. It has to be at least 5 characters. And the message that I will send out if it doesn't is I need to say password must be greater than 5 characters. Put a little smiley in there. No. So the length validator needs 2 different values. It needs to know how long it needs to be and then what the message should be, what the error message should be if they don't meet that. All right, so I can save that, come back. So I'll come in here and I'll put in 3 characters. I'll hit sign up. Okay, and now it's yelling at me about the email and it says, hey, password needs to be greater than 5 characters. So if I do this, okay, it's good with the email now, but it's still saying, hey, it needs to be at least 5 characters. So that's how you can do validation, form validation with the WTF forms, which I think is pretty slick. It makes it pretty easy. Okay, so now that we have the validation, done, we're good to start putting things in the database, because we're making sure that we don't get any empty things in the database, and we're making sure that passwords are what we want them to be and that we're not getting any emails that aren't valid. Okay, so what we want to do now is we're going to go to routes. Okay, we'll go to routes and we're going to import the user class. So from models, right, over here, we're importing database and we're going to import user. Okay, we're importing here this class user, which is all how the database is set up, how it's going to store it, right, and then the password hashing and all that kind of stuff. So we're importing user. Okay. All right, so now that we have that in there, we're going to come down here. So remember, if the request method is post, that means it's trying to submit the form. So if the form validates, if it doesn't validate, we're just going to return it, right? But if it does, instead of saying, hey, return it worked, we got to do all the database stuff too. So if everything validates and everything's good, we need to submit that stuff to the database. So I'm going to say new user, set up a new variable. We're going to use that user class. We're going to say form.firstName.data. In other words, it's going to go out to the form and it's going to grab the data that was entered inside of first name, which was that text box. It's going to go out there and do last name as well. We're going to do the same thing with the email. And we got to do the same thing with the password. So all we're doing here is storing inside of new user what they put in as the first name, what they put in as the last name, what they put in as their email, and what they put in as the password. Okay, so that's all stored inside of new user. Okay, now we're going to use that database class there, and we're going to use session, and we're going to add to the database everything that's stored inside of new user. Okay, once we've added it, we are going to commit those changes. In other words, access the database and put it in. So it adds all this information inside of the session and then takes everything that's inside of the session and commits it to the database. That's it. We don't have to write any SQL or anything. It's just this is all built into the SQL Alchemy, which I think is pretty dang amazing. Okay, now we can see if it works. Can't wait to see what type of errors we get. I'm going to go back home here. I'll hit sign up. Okay, there it is. So I'll type in Dave Kid, put in my email, password ABC123. That's more than 5 characters, so it shouldn't yell at me. We'll hit sign up. Whoa, no errors. It says it worked. So now we can check. We open up pgadmin. We're going to go inside the Python app, go into schemas, public, head over to the tables. Okay, this is where it should have put. This is where it should put the information in. Now I can click here. Now you can't really see it this way. So what you need to do is click on the users table, right click and do view edit data. And we want to do all rows. And this will show us what's inside of the database right now. Well, there it is. Cool. There's my first name. There's the last name I put in. There's the email address that I put in, and then there's the password. It took ABC123 and it hashed it and basically encrypted it. So even database managers would have no idea what the password is. And this is by far the most secure way to store passwords. You should never store passwords as exactly how they are in a database. It should never say ABC123 here. Horrible security. If someone hacks the database, they now have all the passwords for all the users. Where here, if they hack the database, they get all these hashes, and it's a lot harder for them to figure out what the password is. Okay. And I'm sure by now in these videos you've heard all my annoying tics. I say K a lot, and I say all these things a bunch, right? And it's probably annoying, and that's okay, guys. Oh, that's really funny. This was part 2. And it's only like 10 minutes, where part 1 was like over an hour. Now, also, one thing I need to say, and you may be yelling at me right now, like, dude, don't end the video because you got some sort of weird error, right? When you hit submit, it might have said something like, hey, Psycho PG2 needs to be installed, or maybe you got some sort of error about Psycho PG2. I did too. I didn't get that error because I already have it installed, but we got to install that as well if you're getting that error, if it's not working. So what you'll want to do, go inside the app. You're going to do pip install Psycho PG2. Hit enter. Okay. Mine says, requirement already satisfied because I already got it installed, but you may need that plugin to get this to work. Chances are you will. So you just go in there, pip install Psycho PG2, get it installed. Then once that happened, it worked fine for me. I will also say, though, make sure you check your database, because the first time I did this, actually, it had, for my email, it had my first name. It was really weird, and I went back and I looked at my code, and inside of here, I had self first name, and then over here I had self.email equals first name dot lower. So I'd forgot to change that when I copied and pasted a bunch of times, so that was totally screwed up. But anyways, everything's working now exactly the way it should. So hopefully you got it, guys. Like I said, you don't need to turn in anything this week. Just go through these 2 videos and make sure that you're up to snuff. Make sure that you're caught up. Basically, you need to get to the point where you have your sign up page, you have your about page. On the sign up page, it doesn't like that. Oh, I killed the host. But anyways, you have your about page, you have your sign up page, you have the form created. When you type in the information, you got your form validation working. When you type in the information and hit submit, and you come in here and check out your users table, view edit data all rows, you'll see that the information that you put in there gets correctly put inside of the database. If you're that far, great. In the upcoming weeks, we'll talk about adding more functionality, and then also we obviously need to talk about how to get this to Heroku, and that's fun too, getting databases on there and stuff. But anyways, that's it, guys, for these couple weeks. Let me know if you have any questions, but just keep plugging along. Make sure you get the stuff done so you can pass and have a good day and not fail. Failing's bad. All right, guys, talk to you later.